X. There are no precise dates when the generation starts and ends. Researchers and commentators use birth years ranging from the early 1980s to the early 2000s. Terminology. Authors William Strauss and Neil Howe wrote about the millennials in Generations, The History of America's Future, 1584 to 2069, and they released an entire book devoted to them, titled Millennials Rising, The Next Great Generation. Strauss and Howe are widely credited with naming the millennials, according to journalist Bruce Horowitz. In 1987 they coined the term, around the time 1980 by the Securities and Exchange Commission, which still exists, a respective link to the millennial year 2000. Strauss and Howe use 1982 as the millennials' starting birth year and 2004 as the last birth year. The phrase Generation Y first appeared in an August 1993 Ad Age editorial to describe teenagers of the day, which they defined as different from Generation X, and then aged 11 or younger, as well as the teenagers of the upcoming 10 years. Since then, the company has sometimes used 1982 as the starting birth year for this generation. Several alternative names have been proposed by various people: Generation Y, Global Generation, Generation Next, and the Net Generation. Millennials are sometimes also called Echo Boomers, referring to the generation's size relative to the Baby Boomer generation, and due to the significant increase in birth rates during the 1980s and into the 1990s. In the United States, birth rates peaked in 1990 and a 20th century trend toward smaller families in developed countries continued. Newsweek used the term Generation 9/11 to refer to young people who were between the ages of 10 and 20 years on September 11, 2001. The first reference to Generation 9/11 was made in the cover story of the November 12, 2001 issue of Newsweek magazine. This could be considered a subgroup in Generation Y. A global generational study conducted by PwC with the University of Southern California and the London Business School defined millennials as those born between 1980 and 1995. In Australia, a debate occurred regarding the dates for Generation Y, that is, when the generation began and when it ended. Some sources, including the Australian Bureau of Statistics, use 1982 to 2000. In Canada, 1982 is generally thought to be the starting birth year for Generation Y, while the end of the generation has been cited as either 1997 or 2000. Traits and values. Authors William Strauss and Neil Howe believe that each generation has common characteristics that give it a specific character, with 4 basic generational archetypes, repeating in a cycle.